Hey everybody, Joseph Rothschild here, aka Mono Bluetron, back again with another episode of 10-Minute Testing. So I'd like to thank you all for enduring my short hiatus. This weekend was a whirlwind of watching Worlds, and there's nothing more disappointing than inviting friends over to get drunk and yell at 12-year-olds, and instead having to sober up during the 4 hours between matches. Today we're playing a deck I was sold on by a friend at Locals, Timelords. Now that a critical mass of Timelords have been released, I'm sure you've seen more than a couple videos about Timelord Control. I'm here to advocate for the next step in Timelord evolution, Timelord Heralds. So here's the list. God, it feels so good to see Herald of Perfection again. It's like reuniting with an old friend who was directly responsible for the reason why you don't have more of them. Anyway, I'll give you a little bit of background about the archetype, a little bit of a discussion about what I hope the deck can do, and as always, the card by card. So firstly, for those of you unfamiliar with the Time Lords, they're the cards used by the main antagonist of Zexal, Dawn Thousand. They're a series of cards that usually have 0 attack, can be normal summoned without a tribute if you control no monsters, can't be destroyed by battle or card effects, don't take battle damage, and have effects that trigger if they complete a battle. The original playable Time Lord, Metaion, was featured in some Chainburn builds in order to beat back the advantage your opponent would accrue, but as builds moved more towards Balance of Judgment, he was dropped. Then, out of nowhere, another playable Time Lord was printed, Zaphion. This one shuffles all spells and traps your opponent controls into the deck at the end of the battle phase, which was powerful enough to see extensive play at the World Tournament. Alongside this new member of the Time Lord tribe came other, less powerful Time Lords, and a piece of pretty important support, Time Maiden, who has some very interesting applications. Now, despite the new support, the deck has several very unfortunate weaknesses. Firstly, while it excels against most strategies, it has a very difficult time overcoming non-destruction removal, like Kaijus or Whiptail. Secondly, it has a very rough time closing out games. The current linear game plan is to burn your opponents out, which requires a lot of playing off the top of your deck. Thirdly, without consistent access to Time Maiden, the wildly different niche effects of the Time Lords turn them from a toolbox into a, Jesus, how are we going to beat ABC with Zaphion? Adding Herald should solve all 3 of these weaknesses. Firstly, we can just negate most of the abilities that would otherwise answer our Time Lords. Secondly, having more dudes on board will allow us to attack, something Time Lords literally cannot do. And thirdly, Cyber Angel Ben 10 guarantees we have the ability to get Time Maiden if we want. It also allows us to make full use of the synergy between Sanctuary and Time Maiden. She's easy to reborn from Graveyard if we want to add a couple of cards to our hand, and Ritual Sanctuary itself allows us to repeatedly find our ritual spell for Herald. The glue that holds this deck together is the fact that Time Lords are fairies, meaning if one isn't particularly good in a specific matchup, think Zaphion versus creature decks, we can always just pitch it for a negate. So with that, let's get into the card by card. First, we are playing exclusively good Time Lords. 3 copies of Zaphion, this one at the end of the battle phase, shuffles all spells and traps on your opponent's side of the field into the deck. You may recognize Harpy's Feather Duster as a good effect. Next is Metaion, the original Time Lord. This one shuffles all monsters into the deck at the end of the battle phase and deals 300 to your opponent for each card returned. Finally, we're playing 2 of the red-headed stepchild of the archetype, Camion, who shuffles a single card at the end of the battle phase and deals 500, just an all-around pretty strong effect, and it's flexible. Next, we've got 3 copies of Time Maiden, who enables Time Lords even when you have a monster on the field. She can be specialed if you have no monsters, counts as 2 tributes for a Time Lord, tributes herself to add a Time Lord to hand, and can be banished to special a Time Lord from deck. Just insane, and a perfect target for Sanctuary. Next are our rituals. 3 copies of Manju, 3 copies of Herald of Perfection, and 3 copies of Ben 10, the smallest package imaginable. After that are our spells. We have 1 Regeki, 3 Preparation of Rites, which can only get Herald of Perfection, 2 copies of Pot of Desires, 1 Upstart Goblin. You want to be playing as many spells as possible for Sanctuary. 3 copies of Terraforming, 3 copies of Dawn of the Herald, and 1 copy of Machine Angel Ritual. This one's a bit of a stretch, but we often find ourselves desperately trying to kill our opponents. And finally, 3 Ritual Sanctuary. This card allows us to discard a spell to search either half of a ritual or shuffle a grave spell into the deck to special a fairy with the same number of stars from grave. Finally, we end with the Solemn Boys. In the extra, we have basically just a bunch of shit we're never going to summon. 8s for Time Lords, including a Gustav Max, which might be relevant. 4s for Manjus, Utopias, Abyss Dweller. I mean, we're so deep in the rank 4 pool, we're actually playing Cairngorgon. So with that, let's jump into the games. Our first opponent is trying out some of the new counter fairy support, and I'm actually pretty excited for this. This is like 2 silverback gorillas fighting over who gets to be the patriarch. Except The patriarch is whoever gets to do the most annoying shit with fairies, and we're fighting by playing a children's card game. This metaphor kind of got away from me. We've opened very well. We have a copy of Zaphion, as well as a pre-preparation of Rites and a Cyber Angel Benten in order to use our Herald of Perfection effectively. Our opponent has opened very poorly inversely. If this Mausoleum of the Emperor resolves, it'll be fine. They'll have a Splendid Venus, but otherwise they're not going to be able to use this Divine Punishment because they don't have a copy of Sanctuary in the sky, and the Agent of Creation Venus is exciting, but not particularly good in this specific scenario. We're going to start. We're going to activate this pre-prep. We're going to activate this Dawn of the Herald. Don't want to spoil too much of my Time Lord game plan right now. I will actually add the Time Maiden with Benten's effect, but hopefully they have no idea what's up. Our opponent's going to activate Mausoleum of the Emperor. Of course we'll negate that. We'll send the Time Maiden because I intend to get it back with Ritual Sanctuary. They'll set 3 and pass. 2 copies of Spell and Trap cards is enough for me to pull the trigger on Zaphion, so I'll go ahead and summon Time Maiden, then tribute her for the Zaphion that I've drawn. We'll go ahead and walk over this Venus with our Herald of Perfection, then shuffle those 2 cards back. Our opponent is now on 2 cards to our several, and you can see how accruing advantage by using the Time Lords really solves the Herald's problem of falling behind by 1 for 1ing the whole game. We draw into another pre-preparation of Rites. We're going to use another Dawn of the Herald, sending the Benten, getting another copy of Time Maiden, normal summoning her, and tributing for a Camion. I expect to use the Camion next turn, and I expect the set card is probably something pretty worthless. If it's not, we'll probably still be able to negate it. Our opponent draws another trap, and seeing 2 trap set, I am all ready to pull the trigger on this Time Maiden from graveyard, banishing it for a Zaphion, so we'll be able to shuffle them back at the end of the battle step, making sure that they have as little tools as possible to do their next turn. They draw into a Shining Angel. They'll go ahead and set that. That is pretty good news for us because it means we're going to be able to kill them. We'll go ahead and use Ritual Sanctuary to special summon the Time Maiden, go into Camion, start the battle phase, attack, just keeping the Camion out in case this is something that can't be destroyed, but thankfully it is. We'll negate its effect and kill him. Our second match is up against a DDD player, and God, I feel so sorry for this individual. Until we get the new monsters, I don't know how you intend to play this under Link format. We've opened pretty well. We have a copy of pre-preparation of Rites, a Time Maiden, which is excellent, a Ritual Sanctuary with a spell we can discard in order to get ourselves a Benten. Our opponent's opened pretty poorly, but I don't really know what constitutes a good hand in DDD anymore, and this Allure of Darkness might draw him out of it anyway. They get to go first, so they'll start by activating Allure of Darkness, banishing their copy of Doom King Armageddon, and making a Oracle King Dark and a Oblivion Abyss King Ragnarok. That's pretty powerful, I assume. We'll go ahead and pre-prep, and really, we are just so ahead based on our hand that I make one of the most cute plays you can imagine. We'll go ahead and use Time Maiden's effect as special, then normal summon this Metaion, then we'll use Dawn for Herald of Perfection, just so we get protection during the battle step. I'm pretty sure the only card I lose to here is Quaking Mirror Force, and this is my insurance against it. We return our own Herald of Perfection, and because we have a Manju in hand, we can just do that. Our opponent is going to use Dark Contract at the gate to get himself a copy of Lamina, normal summon this Kepler to add a Dark Contract with a Witch to the hand, but really, I'm very excited to go into a copy of Zaphion and destroy all these. He activates Dark Hole, which does not destroy Medion, I think maybe to clear up his Link zone, or maybe out of desperation, because immediately he saltily concedes. Well, because we live in hell and we don't have the ban list yet, our third match is up against Zodiac True Draco, and oh, there's the Quaking Mirror Force I was afraid of last game. We've opened very well once again, but honestly, I think the truth might be the thing that bricked previous builds of Herald decks was that you were playing the Stick Chair combo. The Time Lords are just independently good, so maybe the deck bricks a lot less. We're going to go ahead and activate this pre-preparation of Rites, immediately getting ourselves a Herald of Perfection and a Dawn of the Herald. Then we'll Terraforming for a Ritual Sanctuary, binning our second copy, then using Dawn of the Herald to make Herald of Perfection with Cyber Angel Benten after using the effect of Sanctuary. So we now have a Time Maiden. We're going to go ahead and get ourselves a Zaphion. We have an Upstart Goblin in our grave. I mean, we just have several spells in grave, several fairies in hand. We're ready for anything. We'll go ahead and negate this first Zodiac Barrage, then negate the effect of Rat Pier as well. This should be the end of his turn, and thankfully it is. On our turn, we're going to go ahead and activate Time Maiden's effect to special summon a Zaphion and start the beats. We're going to attack, and we get Quakinged, but thankfully our Herald of Perfection can negate said Quaking. We'll do 1800 damage, shuffle this set card back into the deck, and pass it back. Our opponent is going to normal summon a copy of Whiptail, go into Tigress, try to attach something, which we will immediately negate with our Herald of Perfection. I think they were just hoping we were out of negates, and they'll pass it back. We then have to shuffle our Zaphion back into our deck, unfortunately, and we don't really have anything else to do because we have a monster on our side of the board. We will just attack. We do have a fairy in our hands, so we can probably negate anything they do. Thankfully, they're drawing into the True Draco half of their deck, but none of the monsters. We'll go ahead and attack again, just another 1800, getting in that chip damage anytime we can. Our opponent draws into a Ghost Ash, which is good for disruption, but not particularly good once your opponent already has established a board. We then get Time Maiden, which immediately gets Ghost Ash, and I'm like, yeah, I've got another couple fairies in my hand. I can probably negate that. We'll use Time Maiden's effect expect to get a Camion because I have no idea what he has set, and I'm very scared of it. We'll go ahead and shuffle one back, do 500, try and put him into some sort of bind where we can kill him with repeated Camion activations. He reveals his entire hand of True Dracos and concedes. So we're back with the deck. I mean, that was pretty good. I certainly didn't expect to pick up a game against Zoo, but he did have a hand with very few outs to a resolved Herald. This deck feels incomplete as of now. I think Camion is a pretty easy remove if we start getting better Time Lords, but it also feels like it has a lot of play to it. Herald of Perfection has always been fringe playable, and these two strategies enable each other exceptionally well. I will say if there's one problem remaining, it's that Time Lord's weakness to Kaiju isn't particularly helped by the inclusion of another card that demands a Kaiju as an answer, but at the very least it ensures your opponent can't remove both of them. I've got to say, this at least felt much less Feast or Famine and much less draw dependent than the creature swap controlled Time Lord pure builds I've seen, and I'm happy to see this deck evolve over the coming sets. So that's that. I hope you enjoyed watching me live up to my namesake by playing a bunch of blue cards. If you want to see me play the decks I make on this show on stream, I'm on twitch.tv/monobluetron every Monday and Thursday from 10 to midnight Eastern Standard Time, and if you have an idea for a certain deck or archetype you want to see me play on a future episode of this show, leave it in the comments below and I'll try to get to it. Otherwise, I'll see you Sunday.